a book written by Xenophon, the Athenian historian. The title of his book is Cyropedia, or the translation is The Education of Cyrus. This book describes the education of the ideal ruler based on the activities, the public life of Cyrus, and what he did in terms of state building and administration and so forth. I'm not going to bore you really with a lot of citations from different authors about how important he was in terms of statementhood and so forth, but just to mention the case of Thomas Jefferson, who apparently had two personal copies of Cyropedia, and he apparently recommended the reading of that plus Machiavelli's The Prince to all statesmen. So it shows really how important Cyrus was, and is celebrated by leaders of different countries many centuries after his disappearance. Many centuries after Cyrus, the 1979 revolution re-established again the central role of religion, this time Islam, in the Iranian society and politics. The name of the new regime, the Islamic Republic of Iran, so Islam is prominent there too. The new Iranian leadership prepared a new constitution based on their interpretation and understanding of Islam. This lecture of Islam in Iran is obviously very different from the existing understandings of the same religion in other Muslim countries. So if you look at those countries, neighbors to Iran, who are all Muslim except Armenia, you see that the kind of Islam that is exercised, observed in those countries is not necessarily the same thing that you find in Iran. There are a number of reasons why some people relate that to the Shiism, some to the pre-Islamic history of Iran, the influence of that past and so forth. But what's important to mention is the kind of difference that you can find, and you do find, in the Iranian interpretation of Islam. As I said, this is partly related to Shiism, and maybe more importantly to the question of ijtihad process. Ijtihad is a technical term of Islamic law that describes the process of making a legal decision by independent interpretation of the legal sources, meaning the Quran, and also the Hadith, or the sayings, the tradition of Prophet Muhammad. And ijtihad leaves open the door for a dynamic process of decision-making, interpretation, and so forth. So in other words, there is no, in Islam and in Shiism certainly, there is no such a thing as, unless the Iranians are in the process of creating one, there is no Vatican where there is Pope, and the interpretation of Pope is really the one that all believers follow. In the case of Iran at least, and Shiism in general, to the number of ayatollahs you have interpretation, to the number of Iranians probably you have interpretation of what Islam is about. And it's good and it's bad. It's good because as I said, it leaves really open the door to interpretation, to adaptation of what the religion is and how it should be adapted to the reality of the world and so forth. It's bad because it creates a lot of headache for those who study it. But nevertheless, it's very interesting, really, this situation. So there are a number of established facts for Muslims, those who practice the religion. One of them is that God created laws for mankind, and only God has the authority to do so. God appointed messengers to convey the laws to mankind, and for Shias, they believe that God appointed imams to guide mankind about the laws, and in the absence of the Shias' 12th Imam al-Mahdi, probably you heard the name, who is in occultation, qualified jurists or mujtahids, mujtahid comes from ijtihad as I mentioned earlier, have the duty to find, explore, make accessible God's laws, not creating God's laws, but through their ijtihad interpreting what the law that exists, or as I said, adapted really to the reality. This means that Parliament in the Islamic Republic of Iran has no other function than extracting ordinary laws from the existing divine sources to organize the society. So that's a very, very important really issue when we look at the Iranian parliament and how that parliament functions. In other words, they cannot do anything that is going to put into question really those two fundamental sources of law, the Sharia, the Quran and the Hadith. I have a picture here. It comes from a research published with a colleague 2-3 years ago, and it shows really the structure of power in Iran, and that all this structure that you see here sometimes is extremely confused, but it's all of that is a kind of interpretation really of what Shia or Shiism or what Islam is about, and the structure is really done or created based on that interpretation. You see the leader here. The leader, they call it in Iran the supreme leader. He's an ayatollah, a member of clergy. As you see here on this diagram, his place is really prominent. He's central. As you see also, he is the one who has a lot of power. Probably in the present world, you cannot find any other president, prime minister who has so much power as the leader of the Islamic Republic has. So, as you see again here, he approves the president. In other words, the president who is elected by the public, if the supreme leader doesn't approve him, he is not going to be president. He also appoints right of at your right. He appoints security forces commanders, the police force, the regular army, the the Iranian Revolutionary Guards, and so forth. So extremely important. He also appoints the head of judiciary, who is who has a lot of power over the life and the activities of everybody in the country. He also appoints the 6 clerical members of the Guardian Council. The Guardian Council is the body that screens all candidates for the parliament, for the presidency, and so forth. And also that